taptajeevanam kaviviridham kalmashapaham Shravanamangalam Shrimadatam Bhuyananti Bhuriraj. Your words are like nectar, bringing life to scorched souls. They are praised by poets and remove all sin. They are auspicious to hear, wonderful and exalted. Those who spread these words throughout the world are truly giving souls. Welcome everyone to our class on the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. We're on chapter 23, Festival at Surendra's house, and the date is Sunday, June 15th, 1884, and it's page 451. And Sri Ramakrishna, there are many people there, of course, but now he's in the middle of a conversation with Pratap Majumdar, who was one of the main figures in the Brahmo Samaj. And this is just shortly after Keshav passed away. So there was really, it's a kind of a shame that there was a big difficulty with Keshav giving his daughter in marriage, and then there was a big split, and then he died shortly after that. So this Pratap then became one of the main leaders after that. And so Sri Ramakrishna, he had come to Surendra's house, and they're engaged in conversation. This Pratap had talked about, he says, some women of our country have been to England. This Maratha lady, who was very scholarly, also visited England. Later, she embraced Christianity. Have you heard her name, sir? Master. No, but from what you say, it seems to me that she has a desire for name and fame. That kind of egotism is not good. The feeling, I am the doer, is the outcome of ignorance. But the feeling that God does everything is due to knowledge. God alone is the doer. All others are mere instruments in his hands. We'll get to all of this. This to me is one of, if not the most difficult questions, thorniest questions. This question of who is the doer and free will and who's responsible, and is a very, very tricky question with lots of different positions. But I'll read a little more first. The misfortune that befalls a man on account of his egotism can be realized if you only think of the condition of the calf. The calf says, Hamma, Hamma, that is I. And just look at its misfortune. At times it is yoked to the plow and made to work in the field from sunup to sundown, rain or shine. Again, it may be slaughtered by the butcher. In that case, the flesh is eaten and the skin tanned into hide. From the hide, shoes are made. People put on these shoes and walk on the rough ground. Still, that is not the end of its misfortunes. Drums are made from its skin and mercilessly beaten with sticks. At last, its entrails are made into strings for the bow used in carding cotton. When used by the carder, the string gives the sound tuhu, tuhu, thou, thou. That is, it is thou, O Lord, it is thou. It no longer says Hamma, Hamma, I. Only then does the calf's trouble come to an end and it is liberated. It doesn't return to the world of action. Likewise, when the embodied soul says, O God, I am not the doer, thou art the doer, I am the machine and thou art its operator. Only then does its suffering of worldly life come to an end. Only then does it obtain liberation. It no longer has to be reborn in this world of action. Now, what do we do with all of this? This is very tricky stuff. If we take this literally, when the embodied soul says, O God, I am not the doer, thou art the doer, I am the machine and thou art its operator, then all worldly suffering comes to an end, it's liberated. So we should do that. Huh? So if suppose I say that I'm not responsible for any of my action. I'm not the doer. That God is the real doer. Whatever I do, it's the will of God, or I'm just an instrument in the hands of God. And then I go and rob a bank. So then, what good does any of that do? Huh? Yeah. So uh, there, this question of who is the doer and is there free will? There's so many different positions in all Vedanta positions or different philosophical positions, and they all make sense and they all have their own context. And sometimes, if we go through all of the statements that Sri Ramakrishna makes about this, uh, we'll see even either later here on here we'll see that uh, this is the sign of a liberated soul who can say it. So it's not like there's one position that everything that everybody does is God's will, and that nobody is the doer, and that no one is responsible for anything. God is responsible. That this is a state that comes when one is completely rid of the ego, and that only comes, Ramakrishna will say, when one has God realization. So this song that uh, Sri Ramakrishna used to sing, this uh, song to the Divine Mother, Shokali Tomari Icha, everything is your will, O Mother. All this is something that this Ram Prasad could say, this Ramakrishna can say. We can say it ourselves, but it'll be hypocrisy because we act out of desire, and sometimes even meanness, and sometimes just for worldly enjoyment and to gain power over other people. We have all sorts of motives that are not very spiritual motives or pure motives, even. So, can we say that? Now, if we're very highly philosophical and we analyze and everything, we might be able to come to that type of conclusion. We have one position that we find according to Sankhya philosophy, and which is stressed very much by Sri Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, that if we analyze all action is this interplay between the gunas, internal and external, that it's the mind is taking in things and it sends all that information to buddhi. Buddhi makes some decision, it sends it back to the mind, to the gyanendriyas, to the organs of action, and then the hands and mouth and everything, they do everything. And I had nothing to do with it. I am just the witness of everything. So this is one position. I don't particularly like this position, to be perfectly honest, because it eliminates me. It's very mechanistic. We can say it's a mechanistic or behavioristic. There's a whole school of Western psychology, behaviorism, that will reduce everything, all of our behavior, to other factors, external factors. So it eliminates all free will. Now, is there any free will at all? This is another, all of these are very difficult questions. We have to take a position at some point. If we're really interested in spiritual life, that we have to take some position that uh, we have a little bit of control over what we do. Otherwise, there's no hope. Otherwise, then we're just it's just strict cause and effect, just like a pinball that bounces off of all sorts of different things. That everything is automatic. That there's no scope for any change or improvement. Everything is cause and effect with samskaras and tendencies. That whatever the tendencies say that I should do, that I do it, and I have no choice and no power to do anything other than that. It's a very highly mechanistic way of doing it. But if we feel that I am the witness of everything, and we observe, then we feel some separation from that. This is also a spiritual path. This is a type of jnana yoga, we can say, and it can be very effective if we can establish ourselves in that witnessing consciousness. But if we're like most people, where we have some feeling that I am the doer, we have some feeling that I did it. You say, who did it? I did it. Huh? We have some sense of I. Then we have to ask ourselves, how much freedom did we have to make the decision that we made? And there's actually no way to know 100%, because we can't go back in time and say, well, let me try to do it a different way. We don't know. We may feel that it was a free decision, and it may be that it's not predetermined, but it's predictable. This is also a very interesting distinction. It's not that I couldn't have done it differently, but I'll do it the same way every time because that's the kind of person I am. Like the saint and the scorpion. The saint, it's not that he has no power to get angry at the scorpion. It's not that he doesn't have any freedom to do that, but it's not in his nature to do it. Now, Gita is a little bit, it goes back and forth. That we have that one verse, a couple of verses that blame everything on our nature. Because of our prakriti or swabhava, then we're bound to act in a particular way. And when Arjuna asked Sri Krishna, why do we do things that we think we shouldn't do? We bad things, we don't even want to do it, but somehow we do it as if we're forced to do it. Baladiva, as if some other power is making us do it. So what's the answer? He doesn't say this is his Divine Mother's will. He says, kama, krodha, is rajas. He says, because we have these tendencies, these negative tendencies within, and they take control over us. Now, Swamiji makes a big point that, yes, that we are being pushed in a certain direction by these samskaras, but spiritual life means fighting against this prakriti. And we have, again, some of the nicest verses in Gita have to do with having that power to withstand the force of the passions, to withstand the force of this rajas and tamas and everything, and take control somehow and start to change and create new samskaras. So what position do we take? For most of us, it's not very realistic and not very genuine or authentic to say, no, I'm not the doer. I'm not responsible for any of this. I'm an instrument in the hands of God. To be an instrument in the hands of God means that we have to eliminate the tiniest bit of self-interest, tiniest bit of this lowered ego, that we can't have any personal motive for anything. And we realize how difficult it is. I think this is one of the lessons we get from the incident with Girish Ghosh. When Sri Ramakrishna told Girish that you don't have to worry about anything, that I'll take your responsibility for everything, your power of attorney, that you give your power of attorney to a good man, then you don't have to worry about anything. And then Girish happened to say to Sri Ramakrishna that I have to go to the theater tonight. There's something for me to do. And he said, no, you can't say that. You have to say, if it's the will of God, then I'll go there. Otherwise, you can't depend on what you want to do if you really give this power of attorney. So then Girish said, then I understood that I thought I got off the hook, but I created more trouble for myself. That every second I had to ask myself, if I want to be an instrument in the hands of God, then every second I have to ask myself, he said, is it this wretched little ego that's making me do it? Or am I doing it because free from all the ego, I'm behaving like an instrument in the hands of God, that letting God work for me and direct me and everything. So these are all very tricky questions. Then we have this other idea that God is the Antaryamin, that God is within. It's not that I'm not the doer, but God is impelling me to act in a particular way. I do as you make me do. We have the Duryodhana with that famous statement and everything. But it can be hypocrisy that whatever I do, I say, no, I did it because God made me do it. But I know that it's not true. And then somebody else can come along and say, actually, it was true that everything is this Leela and display of God. And who are you? There's no real I there. It's Brahman alone dwelling within in this big play. And actually, there is no individual. There's another attitude that there was a conversation with a Hari, later Swami Turiyananda, when he's complaining that all of this display of God, but it's death to us. Then Sri Ramakrishna says, but who are you? You have to ask yourself that. You analyze, you'll find, we analyze and we don't find this ego. So Sri Ramakrishna says, you can do that. You analyze 1,000 times and you'll find that the ego, there's nothing there. That it's just an idea. There's no substance to that. He said, but the next moment it comes back. So we have to behave with his understanding that we're not ready for this, that whatever happens is the will of God. We can do it with regard to the results of action. There's another position. These are all positions. There's no, I don't think there's anyone who can say, no, this is exactly the way it is. But this is another position. I do whatever I can do. I try my very best. Whatever happens is God's will. It's out of my hands. So this was Swamiji's prescription. He said, when you're acting, feel like everything depends upon you. And when it comes to the results, feel like everything depends upon God. Something like that. Now, when Sri Ramakrishna says that everything is the will of the Divine Mother, there's another very interesting conversation where Sri Ramakrishna uses very graphic language, that someone is saying that, well, isn't whatever I do the will of God, the will of Mother? And then he says something like, these people live in this world like dogs and jackals running after each other. And he says, you mean to tell me that that's God's will? Huh? So then we get this other position. Yeah, do we have to act in accordance with some divine scheme or something to be able to say it's God's will? Then another time, Sri Ramakrishna, when he's asked about this, that everything is the will of the Divine Mother, and then he gives another interesting answer. He says, if you eat chilies, won't your lips burn? Now, what does that mean? That this law of karma is there. You can say everything is the will of Divine Mother, but then somebody else can say, well, there's cause and effect. Whatever we do will have its result. And then we can say, this is the plan of the Divine Mother, the law of karma, everything. So what do? We're stuck. Huh? If we have to come up with a certain position, I think it's best, at least for me, I think it's best to feel that, yes, all these forces are at work, that I'm not 100% free. I have these samskaras. I don't know everything behind it. I don't know if my decisions are good or bad, but I try my best. I try to eliminate selfishness and try to do something that will be beneficial to myself and to everybody else, and hope that I'm doing the right thing, and then accept the results. And pray that the ego can become less and less. Now, the other thing about this ahankara, it has two meanings. One is this philosophical meaning, and the other is pride. If we can eliminate pride and arrogance, and this feeling that, yeah, I did it, I should be praised for everything that I did. If we can eliminate that, that's enough for most of us in spiritual life. This is the type of question that philosophers for ages and ages have been arguing. And there's no one final answer for all of these things. What appealed to Sri Ramakrishna most was that when this ego is completely eliminated and there's absolute purity of heart, then whatever is done is the will of the Divine Mother, or we can take it that way. Then we become real instruments. Now, if I say I do as Mother makes me do, then there's still some sense of I. there's a little bit of instrumentality. So Sri Ramakrishna gives also this in-between answer. Then be like Hanuman. That if this feeling of I is there, then let it be the servant I. And that means that I don't do anything selfishly, that I try to do everything according to my understanding of the will of the master, what will please the master, what will please Rama. So Hanuman, everything he did was based on that. So Sri Ramakrishna says, yeah, that this may ultimately be true. One day you'll look back and say, this was all a divine play. But for now, you have a little sense of I, and Divine Mother keeps that sense of ego in all of us, so we'll take responsibility for our action. He makes that statement also. That it's not just our false understanding, this feeling of I. Divine Mother keeps that within us. Otherwise, we'll do whatever we want, and we'll say, don't blame me. It wasn't my fault. So when we can say that this is a sign, when we can say that Mother, I do as thou makest me do, this is a sign that we've achieved either God realization or a very high state, something like that. And this is the goal. We want to reach that point. But if we take that position at the very beginning, and with a little hypocrisy and self-deception, then we only get ourselves into trouble. Anyhow, he'll clarify it a little bit. But I think it's important for us to understand that there's a question of adhikara here. Not everyone is qualified to sing the Shokli Tomar Yecha. Everything is thy will, Mother. Yeah, I'm only an instrument. I'm just like the car and you're the driver, that I have no say in anything. And it may ultimately be true, but as long as I'm driving all recklessly all over and speeding and doing everything else, I have to take responsibility. Okay, so let's go back to this. Was a long digression. So I'll repeat this again. Likewise, when the embodied soul says, "Oh God, I am not the doer." So let's say when the embodied soul is qualified to say that. Qualified to say that. "Oh God, I am not the doer, thou art the doer. I am the machine and thou art its operator." Only then does its suffering of worldly life come to an end. Only then does it obtain liberation. Now, Sri Ramakrishna is going to confuse us. He'll say we have to do that to get liberation. Then he'll say only after God realization can we say that. He does that a lot because they work together. It's not really a contradiction. If we want to achieve God realization, we have to adopt this attitude a little bit when we get there. Then when we have that realization, it'll become real to us. Like the ripe ego, we pretend a little bit that we have that. Then after realization, it becomes the real ego. So it no longer has to be reborn in this world of action. So that means that this is the statement that the Jivan Mukta will make, God realized soul. A devotee. How can a man get rid of his ego? Now listen, Master, you cannot get rid of it until you have realized God. If you find a person free from ego, then know for certain that he has seen God. Now, what does free from ego mean? Even the God realized soul has a type of ego. There's ripe ego, because ego means how I think of myself, how I can live in the world. So it has to be free from any type of this gross, heavy, tamasic, rajasic ego. This ego that's only connected with the divine. Devotee. What, sir, are the signs of God vision? Master. Yes, there are such signs. It is said in the Bhagavata that a man who has seen God behaves sometimes like a child, sometimes like a ghoul, sometimes like an inert thing, and sometimes like a madman. Sri Ramakrishna refers to this many, many times. And we see in his lifetime that he at one time or another, that he actually behaved like all of them. Most of the time like a child, and then like a ghoul, that he went through a period when he did his tantric sadhana. That was the main thing. You can't make any distinction between pure and impure. He did things like feces of a jackal and put it on his tongue, all sorts of things like that. Just like a ghoul. Because what is it? It's a combination of the three gunas, a combination of the three gunas. Why should I be affected by that? It's an interesting type of spiritual practice. And an inert thing for months on end, just immersed in samadhi. He couldn't hardly moving, and like a madman. He went through that period of divine madness where they tried everything. This is why they arranged the marriage for him, why the Brahmani had to come and it convinced everybody that it wasn't a regular man, that they thought he was mad. His behavior was so odd that he would roll on the ground crying, "Mother, mother, mother." Nobody knew what was going on. They thought he really had become mad. Even those who respected him, even our Shivnath Shastri, even he used to say that the Paramahamsa has gone off his head by thinking of God too much. Behead hoye. So very few people could understand him at that time. The man, now, these are four things that are mentioned. We also have the Stita Prajna in the Bhagavad Gita, completely different from all of them. So there's no end to the different possibilities of how a God-realized soul can live in the world. They're all different paradigms and all different traditions and customs and practices, different religious practices that will yield a different type of God-realized soul. Some will be like living in the world like fools. There's a Sufi tradition. There's the saint who lives in the world just like a simpleton, something. So all different possibilities. The man who has seen God becomes like a child. He is beyond the three gunas. He is unattached to any of them. He behaves like a ghoul, for he maintains the same attitude towards things holy and unholy. You remember the story of the Purnagyani, that this one sadhu came to Dakshineshwar, and I think there are two versions, one with the Hazra and one with Hridoy. Anyhow, that he behaved really like a madman, but they recognized that there was something special about him, and one of them. You remember Satubhai? I think there are two versions, huh? Either, yeah. I think Thakur says Hridoy. He ran after him and said, and as he's running, this holy man, he throws a brick at him. He doesn't want him to follow. Anyhow, he catches him, and then he says, "Are you a Purnagyani, a perfect knower Brahman?" And he says, "Yes." And he says, "How do I become one?" And he says, "You see this pure water of the Ganga and this filthy ditch water. That means from the latrines and everything. When you make no distinction between these two types of water, then you'll have attained perfect knowledge." And then he took off and left again. That's this attitude of like the ghoul, but it's also a sign. It doesn't have to be a sign. It can be a sign of a madman also, but there are certain God-realized souls who will be like that. He behaves like a ghoul, for he maintains the same attitude towards things holy and unholy. Again, like a madman, he sometimes laughs and sometimes weeps. Now he dresses himself like a dandy, and the next moment he goes entirely naked and roams about with his cloth under his arm. He's describing himself. How many times they would see Thakur, especially in the middle of the night. When he's sleeping, he really can't keep his clothes on. So he'll wake up in the middle of the night and they'll say, with his cloth under his arm, and they'll wake them all up and I'll say, "No, sit for meditation now, sit for meditation." Yeah. So he had a lot of trouble keeping his cloth on. Yeah. And it's because he was absolutely free from any type of this lodja, this modesty and shame and all that stuff. He had nothing of it. Therefore, he seems to be a lunatic. Again, at times, he sits motionless like an inert thing. Devotee, does the ego disappear altogether after the realization of God? Master, yes. Sometimes God totally effaces the ego of his devotee, as in the state of samadhi. So this is really the one time when we lose all sense of individuality, all sense of I consciousness. We lose it when we're sleeping. Ordinary people may lose it. We get very engrossed in reading a book, something like that, temporarily, but it doesn't have any effect afterwards. Uh, but the God realized soul, uh, the his that ordinary ego was totally effaced. That unripe ego, that's completely gone. But the sense of I, it's there. Sri Ramakrishna had an ego. He had this. He said that the Vijnani will have either the ego of knowledge or the ego of devotion. And in his case, it was the ego of devotion that identifying himself as the child of the Divine Mother. Then he would say, sometimes I would look inside and I would see that Divine Mother is there and I am there. Child is there, both of us. Sometimes I would see Divine Mother alone is there. At that time, his ego is completely wiped out. So another interesting conversation. M said to Sri Ramakrishna at one time that because Thakur asked him, "Do I have an ego or not?" And he said, "No, but sometimes you keep a trace of ego to enjoy this really divine relationship." And he says, "No, the Divine Mother keeps it in me, because if it's gone, then we're not even there to keep that trace there." So that state of samadhi, yeah, we're not there to bring the mind back down. It has to be either some pull of karma or something, or in Sri Ramakrishna's case, the will of the Divine Mother. Remain in Bhavamukha. He heard that voice. So, does the ego disappear altogether after the realization of God? Master, yes. Sometimes God totally effaces the ego of his devotee, as in the state of samadhi. But in many cases, he keeps a trace of ego. Now, other times, Sri Ramakrishna says that when the mind comes down, automatically some sense of ego comes. So what he means here by ego, again, this has a broad range of meanings. Does it simply just mean some type of I consciousness, or does it mean some type of identification with the body, body consciousness? Again, a big range of meanings. But that doesn't injure anybody. It is like the ego of a child. A 5-year-old child, no doubt, says I, but that ego doesn't harm anybody. Then he gives he has two examples that he usually gives. Here is the sword. At the touch of the philosopher's stone, steel is turned into gold. The steel sword becomes a sword of gold. The gold sword has the form of a sword, no doubt, but it cannot injure anybody. One cannot cut anything with the gold sword. Now, what is the form of the sword? Our personality, our old samskaras. We remain more or less the same personality type that we were before, but all of the bondage and all of the venom is pulled out of it, sucked out of it. It's perfectly clean and pure. This is why Sri Ramakrishna says, if the clerk goes to jail and he's let out of jail, what will he do after that? Will he jump about and sing and dance in the street? He'll go back to being a clerk. That's what he knows. That's what he does. To some sense of identity. So Sri Ramakrishna, before and after samadhi, he still had the same sweet childlike nature. Of course, we can't really talk about him. He's not a good example. But if we talk about, I mean, we don't see a huge personality change. The transformation is that the binding power is gone, and any negativity, all of that is gone. That's why the other example is the string. That if you burn a string, it'll take the same shape and everything, but you can't use it to tie anything up anymore. And it's just, it looks like a string, but if you puff on it, then it disappears. So that's the ego of the God realized soul. To Pratap, you have been to England. So this Keshav, he made the big splash. He was the first one with Queen Victoria, but then others, the Brahmo Samaj. And Pratap, we know, later he'll go to the Parliament of Religions and cause a lot of trouble there. But so these Brahmos, they had a good standing among the British because they were very pro-Christianity and very pro-social reform. A lot of the things that the British didn't like, with the child marriage and things like that, they were also against. So they were kind of hand in hand with the British a little bit. You've been to England. Tell us what you saw there, Pratap. The English people worship what you call gold. So this Kamni Kanchan is the word that Thakur used, gold, to mean greed. Kamini and Kanchan, lust and greed. These are the two main things. We can add krodha and these other anger and envy. All of the he'll talk about the six passions, but for some reason, Sri Ramakrishna emphasized these two: this lust and greed. So the English people worship what you call gold. Of course, there are also some good people in England, those who live an unattached life, but generally one finds there a great display of rajas in everything. I saw the same thing in America. So rajas here will mean a display of wealth and power and learning, all sorts of things, to make a big show of everything. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, he was so universal in his thinking. What's the first thing he'll say? Oh, we don't have that here. He says everybody else will like to think that India is so great and these other countries have nothing. And well, it's interesting what he says. Master, to Pratap, it is not in England alone that one sees attachment to worldly things. You see it everywhere. Of course, to different degrees in different countries, but still. Remember that work is only the first step in spiritual life. Now we'll get a whole long section about karma yoga and the role of karma yoga and the role of work. Work is only the first step in spiritual life. Now there are really two theories about karma yoga. One is karma yoga can take us directly to God realization. And we find both of these in the Gita. That King Janaka, just through karma alone, he attained the highest perfection. Then we have the other idea that karma gets us to the first stage, and then we have to practice renunciation and give up work and everything and get to the higher stage. So the karma can either be looked upon as a preliminary type of discipline that is used to purify the soul, and it's used to eliminate this feeling of I and to eliminate attachment. And once we've done all of that, then we're ready to lead a life of renunciation and a life of meditation and knowledge. This is a kind of traditional view. Shankaracharya likes this view also, but Sri Ramakrishna will talk about this. That at some point, for most people, we have to start lessening the work that we do in the world and dive deep in spiritual practice. Part of this is also because he's talking to Pratap. We always have to pay attention to who he's talking to at the time. So the Brahmo Samaj, they had such strong emphasis on social reform that Sri Ramakrishna was always trying to tell them, okay, this is good what you do, but don't forget that within is this mine of gold. And this is the real goal of life, to have that realization. Don't get too distracted with all of this because some ego comes, some attachment comes, some feeling that we're the saviors of the world, we'll eliminate all this terrible things going on, that this comes. So God cannot be realized without sattva. Sattva means a little bit of absence of rajas, absence of activity, a little bit of renunciation. Love, discrimination, kindness, and so on. It is the very nature of rajas to involve a man in many worldly activities. That is why rajas degenerates into tamas. Now, we have two theories here that Swamiji emphasizes the idea if we're sunk in tamas, we need rajas to get out of it. Now, Sri Ramakrishna is saying if we get too involved with rajas, it can pull us back down again into tamas. So we have to understand that the real goal of rajas is to overcome tamas, but it has to lead us to sattva. Otherwise, we'll get the old attachments back again, and the anger and all of these things, and we'll fall back into tamas. So that is why rajas degenerates into tamas. If a man is entangled in too many activities, he surely forgets God. He becomes more and more attached to lust and gold. But it is not possible for you to give up work altogether. Now, he's going to another one of the strong points of emphasis in Gita, that whatever we do is a type of karma. If we think that we can transcend karma at all, even sitting for meditation is a type of karma. This all falls within this idea of work, action, activity. It is not possible for you to give up work altogether. Your very nature will lead you to it, whether you like it or not. Exactly what Sri Krishna said to Arjuna. Yeah, you don't want to fight in this war. Your very nature will make you do it. Therefore, the scriptures ask you to work in a detached spirit. That is to say, not to crave the work's results. So we can feel that we're the doer at the time of action, but we have no adhikara, that we have no right. It's out of our hands what the results are, and we shouldn't claim and feel any pride if what we do is successful. Then we say, by God's grace, it was successful. If not, then we say that it wasn't God's will. That's all. We tried our best, but that's not in our hands. There's adhikara. This word is used. It's a very strong word that we're forbidden. We're not allowed to. That's not within our range to feel that we have control over the results of anything. Now, of course, we won't take this 100% literally. We know that if we do something with great care and attention and everything, a much better chance the result will be good. We shouldn't think that nothing depends upon us, but we don't claim credit for anything. Yeah, this is what Swamiji's emphasis whatever we do, especially if our karma yoga is a devotional karma yoga. If this karma yoga means that everything is an offering to God, then we have to do everything with tremendous care. And if we're simply karma yogis that understand that the same mind that is performing action will also be performing meditation, that we want that mind to pay perfect attention to every little detail of everything. This is a training of the mind. And that even to perform action with this love and attention to detail and putting our heart and soul into it, that this is a type of worship. Again, another great idea in the Gita, that this is how great one way to worship God, through performance of action of our duty, not selfish action, whatever duty is allotted to us. If we do that with great love and devotion and striving for perfection, but not being obsessed, not obsessing over it, then it becomes a type of worship. And that can also take us to the highest goal. So these are all different positions. They don't conflict with each other, but they represent different attitudes that people take at different times also. Swamiji liked this idea. When we're doing action, then we can be 100% karma yogis. When we sit for meditation, we'll be 100% yogis. When we're doing puja, we'll be bhaktas, all of that. It's not that we're dividing ourselves up. It's not that there's some conflict with them. We're many-sided people. And if we have one ideal, then we can incorporate and integrate all of these into that one ideal. Should be no conflict at all. And Swamiji wanted that for the monks. He said, I want my monks to be able to get up for meditation, go to the market and buy vegetables, go to the field, go milk the cows, go back to the shrine, do all of that without feeling any conflict, to be able to do all of these things, all wrapped around this idea of love of the ideal and striving for realization. Therefore, the scriptures ask you to work in a detached spirit, that is to say, not to crave the work's results. For example, you may perform devotions and worship and practice austerities, but your aim is not to earn people's recognition or to increase your merit. So this karma yoga, this ideal of karma yoga, has to apply to our spiritual practice also. If every time we sit for meditation, we do it in order not only just to impress other people, but even if we do it uh, so that we'll increase our sattva, this and that, it's not bad. But even this meditation and everything can be done as an offering. That I'm not doing it to gain anything from it. I'm doing it so that I can lay it at your feet as an offering. This is also a type of devotional attitude that people can take. To work in such a spirit of detachment is known as karma yoga, but it is very difficult. Now, Sri Ramakrishna will say that the path of knowledge, jnana yoga, is very difficult in this Kali Yuga. The path of karma yoga is difficult in this Kali Yuga. The path of Raja yoga is difficult in this Kali Yuga. The path of bhakti yoga is also not so easy, but best suited to people who have their attachments, who have their short attention spans. All of us in this particular age. That's the one that most people are best suited for. Bhakti yoga can include all of them, and this is the way we try to practice it. That we don't say, "Oh, I'm a devotee, I won't practice meditation." That becomes part of it. Or I won't do this, do everything as an offering to God. That's part of it. All of these things have to be included with the Bhakti Yoga, includes all of them. We are living in the Kali Yuga when one easily becomes attached to one's actions. You may think that you are working in a detached spirit, but attachment creeps into the mind from nobody knows where. And unless we do some spiritual practice, then even then it can come. But if we don't do any spiritual practice at all, it's very difficult not to have this feeling of pride and everything come in. Even people who do a lot of spiritual practice, they can be the most prideful people because of all their spiritual practice. This is the ego of spirituality. Yeah, I think Swamiji says in one place, this is the last hurdle. And this is really that sattvic ego that becomes the last hurdle. We have to go beyond that also. You may worship in the temple or arrange a grand religious festival or feed many poor and starving people. You may think you have done all this without hankering after the results, but unknown to yourself, the desire for name and fame has somehow crept into your mind. Complete detachment from the results of action is possible only for one who has seen God. I think the best example of this is Swamiji himself, who accomplished more than him. What he did, the Parliament of Religions, his work in the West, coming back, how people just were mad for him. No one ever received a reception like Swamiji did. No political figure, nobody, ever, in India. And yet, absolutely no attachment. First thing he wanted to do, turn over all the money to Swami Ramananda to give up everything. Now, Raja, everything is in your hands. I just want to retire and find some small corner to live and everything. He had no attachment, no feeling of greatness, that how much he had done. Even when he would say things like, if there were another Vivekananda, he alone would understand what this Vivekananda has done. Sounds like a very egotistical statement. But right after that, he said, but how many Vivekanandas will come in the future? And how Sri Ramakrishna, from the dust of the earth, could have created thousands of Vivekanandas. So he had no attachment to such accomplishments that he made. So complete detachment from the results of action is possible only for one who has seen God. Then what do? We try to lessen our attachment. If it's not complete, then at least let it be as far as possible. We try to lessen that. A devotee. Then what is the way for those who have not seen God? Must they give up all the duties of the world? Master. The best path for this age is Bhakti Yoga, the path of bhakti prescribed by Narada, to sing the name and glories of God and pray to Him with a longing heart. O God, give me knowledge, give me devotion, and reveal Thyself to me. Somebody was asking me recently, can we pray for ourselves? And I said, how many times Sri Ramakrishna says we have to pray for ourselves, not for material things, but to pray for his love and devotion and dispassion and all the spiritual qualities. So pray to him with a longing heart. O God, give me knowledge, give me devotion, and reveal thyself to me. The path of karma is extremely difficult. Therefore, one should pray, O God, make my duties fewer and fewer, and may I, through thy grace, do the few duties that thou givest me without any attachment to their results. May I have no desire to be involved in many activities. So this is part of the uh, progression that people make in life, in spiritual life, that we reach the stage of retirement. At some point, we feel that I've contributed to society, to the family. I've done what I was supposed to do. I've fulfilled my duties. I did as best as possible. Now it's time for me to slowly give up and I'll give the whole mind to the spiritual practice and spiritual life. It is not possible to give up work altogether. So now going back to that other theme, even to think or to meditate is a kind of work. As you develop love for God, your worldly activities become fewer and fewer of themselves. Now, this is another theme that we find with Sri Ramakrishna, that if we're very, very sincere in spiritual life, these duties will drop off, that we don't have to make a decision ourselves. That illustration he gives, that the daughter-in-law becomes pregnant, living in the house of her in-laws, and her mother-in-law, month by month, reduces the duties as she becomes closer to the due date. And when the final month is there, she has nothing to do, no duties whatsoever. After the child is born, her duty is to play with the child, raise the child. And so he doesn't say that the daughter-in-law lessens her duties. The mother-in-law does it. So Thakur always said that these things automatically start to fall off as we progress in spiritual life, that we'll find that things will become smooth for us. You know, my favorite phrase in the gospel is Anukul Hawa, that this favorable breeze will come and things will fall into place. He says, yeah, perhaps the older brother will take over the work, look after the family and everything, and you're free for all of that, that the things will fall into line if we're sincere. And the duties that we have in the world at some point will be able to let go and they'll fall off. We won't cling to them. This was that whole point with this advice to Ishan, how Sri Ramakrishna said, look, you're an old man now still, you're running after this arbitration and doing all of these things and everything. Now's the time to dive deep in spiritual life. So it's a question of what stage in life we're at also. This Pratap, I don't know how old he is now. He's probably his 50s or something like that. Probably like Keshav's age or something. I don't know. Anybody know? Pratap. Anyhow, he's talking to a whole group of people, not just him. As you develop love for God, your worldly activities become fewer and fewer of themselves, and you lose all interest in them. Can one who has tasted a drink made of sugar candy enjoy a drink made of ordinary molasses? So we get a little bit of taste of the enjoyment of spiritual life, holy company, all of these things. We don't care for any other types of enjoyment. A devotee. The English people always exhort us to be active. Isn't action the aim of life then? Master. The aim of life is the attainment of God. Work is only a preliminary step. It can never be the end. Even unselfish work is only a means. It is not the end. Now, what about Swamiji and all of his emphasis? I remember reading once one of our monks, he said that Swamiji didn't preach Karma Yoga, that Karma Yoga is a path to something else. He taught worship, that worship through service, and there was no motive for it. It wasn't to purify the soul, nothing like that, but seeing God in others and worshiping God through that. So it was a little different from this traditional view of Karma Yoga that Sri Ramakrishna is talking about. So even unselfish work is only a means, it is not the end. Shambhu Malik once said to me, "Please bless me, sir, that I may spend all my money for good purposes, such as building hospitals and dispensaries, making roads and digging wells." Now, it's a nice sentiment. Huh? There's nothing wrong with it. But Thakur knows these people. He knows the little recognition behind it and all the different things. These are complicated people. I said to him, "It will be good if you can do these things in a spirit of detachment, but that is very difficult. Whatever you may do, you must always remember that the aim of this life of yours is the attainment of God, and not the building of hospitals and dispensaries. Suppose God appeared before you and said to you, 'Accept a boon from me.' Would you then ask him, 'O God, build me some hospitals and dispensaries?' Or would you not rather pray to him, 'O God, may I have pure love at your lotus feet. May I have your uninterrupted vision.' Hospitals, dispensaries, and all such things are unreal." Now remember, most of the time, that I don't like this. You know that. Most of the time, Thakur says anitya. These things are transitory. He's not saying the unreal like a dream, like that. These things are passing shows. All such things are unreal. God alone is real, and all else unreal. All else is transitory, passing. It's a passing show that goes by like that. 2 days only, he says. Furthermore, after realizing God, one feels that he alone is the doer and we are but his instruments. Now we go back to the very beginning. After realizing God, that one feels that. After realizing God, one feels that he alone is the doer and we are but his instruments. Then why should we forget him and destroy ourselves by being involved in too many activities? After realizing him, one may, through his grace, become his instrument in building many hospitals and dispensaries. So then, really, we make no decisions. This is the dried leaf in the storm. If we're blown in that direction to do some good work for the world, we do it. If we're blown in the other direction to lead a solitary life in a cave, we do it. Makes no difference. We don't make any decisions then. Therefore, I say again that work is only the first step. It can never be the goal of life. Devote yourself to spiritual practice and go forward. Through practice, you will advance more and more in the path of God. At last, you will come to know that God alone is real and all else is illusory, transitory, and that the goal of life is the attainment of God. Okay, we can stop here. Really, when Sri Ramakrishna says things, especially things about this who is the doer and all of that, we really have to look at all of the things that he says and the context and everything, and not misunderstand and take these things out of context and think we're qualified to take a certain attitude when we're not qualified yet. We appreciate it and we strive for it. Even Holy Mother, the Holy Mother prayed. She said, "I used to pray to the Divine Mother, Mother, make my will one with your will." She doesn't say, "Whatever I do because you make me do it." She could have, would have easily done it. But this is a safer attitude for us that pray that whatever we do will be free from all selfish motives and we will have some purity of motive behind it. Two announcements for those of you who are within range of the center and come. Sunday, day after tomorrow, is a half-day meditation day. So it starts at 10 o'clock, not at 11 o'clock. So please come for that. There'll be two sessions. There'll be just a short introductory reading or something, and then silent meditation, a little break, the second one, and then we'll have lunch for everyone. And next Wednesday, I sent out a message with the wrong day on it. Yeah, I think I put Tuesday the 26th, Wednesday the 26th. It's Swami Vivekananda visiting from India. He's the senior most assistant general secretary now, and a very wonderful, very simple and sweet-natured Swami. So we'll have satsang with him Wednesday night at 7:30. You can come for meditation at 6:30 and stay on for that. So that'll also be a very nice thing. Then the next Sunday, Prarajika Prabhuta Pranaji, she'll be speaking here. So that'll be the last Sunday of the month. Yeah. So now we'll close. Oh, and it'll be a PowerPoint presentation. Yeah. So it should be something very special. Om Niranjanam Nityamanandarupam Bhaktanukam Bhatudha Vikramai Ishavataram Parameshamidhyam Tam Ramakrishnam Shirisanamama. We bow our heads before Sri Ramakrishna, who is stainless, of infinite nature, whose heart melts in sympathy for his devotees, who is an embodiment of the divine and the Supreme Lord, and ever worthy of our worship. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto you.